Formula One team's season was crippled. Not a mechanical failure, not driver error, a virus. A Trojan file, invisible until it was too late. I was there with that team, a mechanic in the garage when the screens went black.
How will this Trojan virus attack set the team back?
Since then, the threats have only evolved.
With the rise in shadow AI and AI agents, how are teams preparing?
At Oracle Red Bull Racing, speed is nothing without trust. Behind every lap, every call, every win, lies a digital backbone built to guard against the unseen. I'm Callum Nicholas, and this is Securing the Win, where we uncover the hidden stories in Formula One and with OnePassword, take you inside one of the sport's most secure organizations. As a mechanic, I helped build Max Verstappen's championship-winning cars. And now, as an Oracle Red Bull Racing ambassador, I'm bringing you the unheard stories that defined championships. Hello and welcome to our Oracle Red Bull Racing OnePassword Securing the Win podcast. Now, joining me today in our Hall of Fame here in MK7 is Oracle Red Bull Racing's Chief Information Officer, Matt Cadieux. Firstly, Matt, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today.
Yeah.
Now, Matt, for the last 2 decades, has overseen our digital infrastructure, the one that stretches from here at HQ in Milton Keynes to races all over the world and from the pit wall to the cockpit. Matt, it sounds like a lot. So let's get started there. Now, I joined Formula One in an era where technicians and mechanics didn't even need a laptop to run a car. So try and give me an idea in your tenure of how much the scale of this operation has changed.
Sure. Yeah, so the scale has massively changed. I've been with the team from the very beginning. Prior to that, I worked for 15 years at in global companies, totally different culture, infrastructure activities. But from when I started, we had less than 300 people here. The business activities we were involved in was designing, making racing cars. We didn't have sophistication or digital methods in anything we really did. And now we're 6 times bigger. We are designing, making not only cars, but also powertrains and have advanced technology where we're making hypercars. Our marketing department has grown, and we have a big fan base that we interact with. So the activities in the company have changed, and the number of people we support has increased by over 600%.
Wow.
So, and what we actually touch is pretty much every major business activity throughout the campus. So the cars are designed in the virtual world. They're tested largely in the virtual world or on special rigs here on our campus. In manufacturing, digital tools control all the devices at our factory floor, and ERP systems schedule and manage our workflows. And then at the track, we use analytics and simulations to make the right choices. And then we have to do a lot of logistical things like track every part that has a unique serial number and know the operating history of it, what car was it on, what sessions, and we have to do that for safety and reliability. So we touch literally every person. And, every corner, and the technology enables people to be more efficient, more innovative, faster moving, and it's just core to what we do. Yeah. And it's also something in general behind the scenes and a little bit thankless sometimes. And if it goes wrong, it's a big deal. If it doesn't, then it's sort of sometimes thankless.
Yeah, so this was sort of my next question, really. So, over the course of a Formula One race weekend, we get so much spotlight on the drivers and even their engineers and senior management and all of those things. Now, a lot of the people that work under your umbrella, they're often considered the unsung heroes. Yeah. As you say, IT infrastructure, it really does touch every single corner of the business. Yeah. It's every sign-in, every bit of data that gets sent off. When it fails, it's not a small thing, is it? It's not like, right. We've had this issue with this. It really can grind you to a halt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, business continuity is a big thing, and the company is fast-moving in all aspects, from design, manufacturing, racing, or support functions like finance, marketing, HR. Yeah. The whole culture of this business is move fast, not only with the car, but in everything we do. And it's all enabled by digital solutions. Yeah. So it's really critical that we put in, build the right resilience, put the right security in, and have still allow speed, but have enough control to protect ourselves.
And like we say, it touches all these departments, but it's not just everything that's here on campus, is it? This operation, it physically spreads around the world.
Yeah, that's right.
And I guess for me, it's one of those things, it's quite hard to picture how you go about ensuring that you have the same safety and the same protocols and all of the things that you need to trust a device when it's halfway across in a different continent.
Yep. Yeah, it is. We have 24 races a year, a different country. It's mad. You show up a week or less before the race, and you leave the day after the race.
Yeah, and I guess one of those things, I suppose, if it was all here and it was all right here where you could sort of see it and reach it, that'd probably be quite relaxing for you, as opposed to not knowing what's going off in a different world.
Yeah, it's not relaxing here either. But no, I think, here 90% of the people are here and do not travel. We're design, manufacturing, and support functions. But even here, we've doubled in size the last 5-6 years, and managing growth and building protections in is actually quite a big challenge. But at the track, it's more Wild West in a way. It's different facilities. They're not facilities we own, and there's a lot more variability and a lot more third parties around. And so we have layers of protection that we have, and so things like the network at the track. When people connect to it, we need to know they're trusted people. We need to know who people are, who they claim to be. The devices that they connect to the network need to be validated as devices that we have own and have control of, and it has the right posture in it. Our network needs the right controls built into it. And then people, just training and people are a big part of our security solution. We're protecting our operations, our intellectual property. It's not just an IT or a security challenge. It's a shared responsibility across everyone. So having the right culture where people take it seriously. So that's like an onion with lots of layers that we have to build in to really protect ourselves, our assets, and our operations.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think, again, I've been in some situations throughout my career where we've seen the consequences of what happens when it fails. I think back to Imola, I think it was 2021, when we sort of saw a circuit-wide failure that sort of affected everybody, and the pit wall is now blind. And not only is that obviously a pain when we're trying to work and gain performance, but also it then, it can become a safety issue. Some of these systems and these apps, they're systems that are there to keep not just the driver safe, but everybody in the garage. I think off the top of my mind, I think of things like our energy recovery systems. There's so many things that are inbuilt to ensure everyone's safety, and that, that digital architecture is a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and as we design the solutions, we need to anticipate that things will go wrong, and you need to build in factors of safety and backup plans, and even if you have to sometimes go manual, you may lose some capability or speed, but if you have to go to plan C or plan D, you can still carry on operating. So all of that is designed in, and when you put in new tools or new capabilities, you hear all the marketing hype, but to actually introduce it where it's bedded into our operations, there's a lot of due diligence to build in all the practical controls and all the security features.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think there have been plenty of important lessons learned over the years, right? Things that have happened across the paddock in other teams. I was a mechanic in a garage back in 2014 when, during pre-season testing, just one morning, everything went black. And, that was a Trojan virus, and we lost a load of data, but the disruption it caused back then, I think it's fair to say it sort of carried into our whole season, because we lost that day of running, and then the following day is still affected by those same issues. So then you're behind, and these things, they snowball, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not just a case of, we need to get this because it works right now. When it doesn't work, the sort of ongoing impact of that, it can be really hard to get back on top of.
It can be catastrophic.
Yeah, and is there a way that you look at trying to learn from each one of those incidents?
Yeah, I think when we have an incident, well, first we try to do everything possible to avoid incidents.
Prevention is better than the cure, for sure.
Yeah, and to do that is not trivial. It needs, some of our best people engaging with really strong partners to learn about the best practices and the best tools we can adopt. And so all of that sort of needs to be thought about and designed in. But then if an incident does happen, then we need to go in and understand what were the root causes. How can we get smarter about this to prevent it? If we do have an incident, also how can we be smarter in how we react to it, how we minimize the damage?
Okay.
And so we absolutely need to learn from failures. And knock on wood, we don't have too many. But for us, a lot of our effort is to be proactive.
Yep.
And as the world becomes more dangerous, as the threats, there's more threats, and with more sophistication, we need to keep investing and stay at the head of the curve instead of trying to be at the receiving end of something that's really catastrophic.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think it's it's easy to say, oh yeah, we had a failure and we learned from it sometimes. And I speak from personal experience, and I can think of even a small one at Brazil last year. You can have something that hasn't gone quite right, and you might get lucky that day, but you still have to learn from it, right? Because the following time you're not going to get lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky and you had a close call, that also needs as much due diligence to understand how did this close call happen?
Yeah.
How do we avoid future close calls?
I think of a really good one actually, and it was Brazil last year when we were back and forth out into the pit lane. The weather was constantly changing, and at the time we had so many radio messages in our ear talking about what tires we would take at what point of the race. And at some point when Checo was coming into the pits, we fitted a set of wet tires. Now, oddly enough, it wasn't the right decision. It's not what the engineers called for, but it worked out perfectly. Checo was actually the fastest car on the track for that period that he was on the wet tire. And then when the red flag came out, we were able to rectify the decision already. Now, I think it's a perfect example of an incident where you haven't necessarily got it quite right. Something hasn't gone quite right and we've got away with it. But I remember coming back from that race, and the first thing we did was we had a full race team meeting to understand what had gone wrong and just ensure that we were on top of our procedures, because we knew very well that the next time it would be really, really costly.
Yep.
Right? So how hard can it be, right? We talk about the outages and the consequences for them. How hard really is it now when these cars that you see, they are essentially rolling computers, right?
Yeah.
It's not just mechanical systems that we're looking after and that need attention to detail. There are some often quite, temperamental or fragile systems that really need attention, but they're flying around a racetrack at 200 mile an hour. How do you think about how we protect those systems?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the systems on the car, the electronic systems and the ECU and how it all comes back, into our control to do something with the data.
Yeah.
A lot of that we're buying a service, and some of it's mandated by the FIA.
Okay.
And as I've selected things, I've picked something that's functional, secure, reliable.
Yeah.
But then when we get the data and to make decisions, now we operate the car and on our tactics, that it's in our control. And there we have this whole layer of controls, down to who's interacting with the data.
Yeah.
Are they people? Are they part of the team? What devices are we using? Is it all things under our control with our posture and controls in it? And then procedurally, who's doing what? Are they doing the right thing? So all of that needs to make sense, and there's just a lot of effort going into minute details, to make sure we have a really robust ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of thing that engineers or manufacturers and mechanics do.
Yes.
There's a huge amount of attention to detail and lots of fractional little gains in doing fractional things and doing the basics right. Executing really well really matters. And if you're sloppy or casual, accidents or bad things happen.
Well, this is it. And we often used to say, if you've allowed room for a mistake, it will happen. It will happen at the worst possible time. And ultimately, that's not an accident. That's something that you've neglected, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're always trying to avoid that. Now, with these cars and the amount of tech that's in them, we've seen in the past at races where we've had incidents of interference and affected with our systems. Are there things that you can do beforehand to mitigate those risks? Or is it a case, again, of you have to ensure that your systems are as well prepared as they can be and then just learn when we find out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of history and a lot of knowledge in the company. A lot of people who've been here for a long time,
Absolutely.
who've suffered all the painful incidents. And as you're designing, it's really back when you conceptualize new projects and architect the car or systems, understanding functionally what it has to do, but all the fault modes and building in designs that take all that into account. And there's so much accumulated knowledge, bringing the right people in, and people that also have different disciplines and collaborating to come up with really difficult, complex designs.
Yep.
So it's teamwork, skills, knowledge, but then the ethos of aiming for perfection, and demanding excellence instead of being it's good enough. It's sort of the culture around the whole company, not just around mechanics or engineers, but also in IT.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's like the old thing of if you shoot for the moon, and even if you do miss, you might land among the stars.
You might get close. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, I love that. Okay, so let's come back to the factory here in MK7. This is where some of your most important intellectual property is kept, right? We're talking about CAD files, strategy, dyno results, wind tunnel data. How do you protect all of that?
With a lot of effort.
First and foremost, but I mean, like, is it about the culture? I assume that's a big part of it, but also the tools that are available to you.
Yeah, I think the first thing is understanding what is sensitive.
Yep.
And so sitting down with Pierre and sort of the leadership in engineering and understanding what is special, what gives us competitive advantage, what are the assets and knowledge that we really want to keep inside and not leak it to our competitors. So then, from there, what's sensitive, then it comes down to, okay, what are the systems and applications interacting or creating this data? Where is it stored? Who has access to it? And how do we make sure that all those details are managed really rigorously? And, where are the vulnerabilities? And do something to reduce the vulnerabilities. So we go through a really structured discussion, but the starting point is, hey, engineering, what are our secrets?
Yeah, and who needs them?
And who needs them?
And it's not me, just for the record. So all of you that message me on social media asking me stuff about the car, I just don't know.
And I think that our trade-off is also we need just enough control. And if we add so much in that it slows down development, we've not done the company a favor. But if we have big breaches because we've cut it too close, we haven't done the company a favor either. So getting that balance right is really hard to manage. And in general, people hate what's perceived as bureaucracy. And you need to really be able to clearly say, this is why we need to protect things. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we do it most efficiently. But there's also effort that needs to go into protecting our assets. And
so I guess it's about breeding that culture of
that's
security.
Right.
And as part of that, sort of helping people to understand the stakes, because it is so quick, isn't it? We're not talking about somebody printing something off and sneaking out of the building with it. We're talking about data that moves incredibly quickly.
That's right.
There's no pulling it back once it's gone. It's a case of making people understand the stakes, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think one of our tactics to try to make people understand, rather than security being a responsibility of IT or a security team, like I mentioned before, it's a shared responsibility, and having something that really adds performance to the car. If our competitors understand our tricks, it's not an advantage, and it hurts everybody in the checkbook, but also just the performance of the team and our pride in what the team does.
And even to an extent, morale, right? You've got a design office that are going and putting thousands of hours into coming up with these ideas. And so, losing that to a competitor becomes a real hit, no?
Yeah, exactly. So part of my job and part of my team's job is to tell people this is why it's important. Here's what we're really protecting. Here's what it takes to protect it well. And us doing our job well to partner with the right people and to have the right processes in place. But then people, if you tell the right story, it all makes sense, and people go, yeah, we should be doing this.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it's a big challenge, but I think we have a security team, Mark, who runs it, who's been a racer for 25, 30 years. He understands the culture, the dynamics, the pressures, and he also talks to all the experts and around security and products that help manage security, and he gets the balance right. But that's somebody with 25 years of battle scars.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, actually. I often talk to people who ask me about getting into the sport as a mechanic or a technician, and I would say one of the most important things you can have is just a love for racing.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that the same for all of you and all the people that, do create this digital system? And I say you're unsung heroes and it's behind the scenes, but is it the same? Is it just a love for motorsport and racing?
Yeah, I think in motorsport, but also the culture of pushing boundaries, moving really fast, and not being stagnant, not being in a company that's just not invested in sweating things.
Yeah.
So whether people love the action on the track, but the ethos of the other people that have the passion, within a month of somebody starting, whether they really fit in or not. And the culture is, it is extreme probably in pushing boundaries continuously and unrelenting. And, people think they understand what that means. And even in the interview process, you describe it. But yeah, sometimes people get through the interview process and you find out after a few weeks here, no, it's not.
Well, this
not
is
for
it.
them.
I think you're right, and I say this often, is like that love of racing sort of speaks to whether you're built for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's not for everyone.
Now, before we move on, because I still want to just focus on the things that we have here in MK7. So one of the things that I love in our factory is our ops room, our control room.
Yep.
Where you've got, 30, 40 people sat in there over a race weekend with live communication to the pit wall. Is that like a bit of infrastructure that you're really proud of? Because it seems like an amazing thing. I've only got the opportunity to be in there a few times, but it does seem like what an amazing place to watch a race from a start.
Yeah, there's more brain power. It understands the car, how it operates, the driver, what the driver's doing, the decisions, and what's in your control. How do you influence things? Yeah. So if you watch on Sky and you hear, 2 or 3 talking heads, you got 40 people that are experts with really deep knowledge, and they're all people with different disciplines. So there's strategists, people that are managing the suspension, the dynamics of the car, aero people, electronics people. But they're all making decisions that need to come together, with under speed to really influence, decisions on how you set up the car or how you're racing the car and your tactics. And so the amount of applications, the amount of infrastructure, the amount of security that goes in to allow really fast data-driven decision-making, there's a huge amount of effort that's gone in to design that and also put the procedures in place to use the tools correctly.
And you know what, it is amazing. Like I've been in the garage where we've had a fault that we were only just discussing person to person in the garage, and by the time the session's finished, I'll go back to my work area and look at my laptop, and I've already got an email from the controls room with all the data and information that I need. And it just goes to show how useful a facility it is in terms of operating at speed. Because, at the track now, with our curfews and the time between sessions, it's absolutely imperative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when a problem like that is found, you can have photographs, telemetry, feedback from driver, feedback from mechanics, all that going back really clearly to the engineer who actually designed it in the ops room. They can bring up design data, simulation data, and understand, how do we bolster things or deal with problems. And the person who knows more about that part than anyone can give advice, and also, some simulations or images or whatever back to people who then can take actions at the track. And there's so many parts of the car and so many disciplines, but you can get data to people who can deal with the problem really quickly and get advice back.
Sure.
And all that took a lot of effort to design the infrastructure to enable it.
Does it ever keep you up at night, the thought of, these CAD files flying around the world between devices? Is it something that's, okay, I know we've designed the systems and we have the tools to manage it, but do you go home at night and ever just wonder?
You can't, otherwise you'd never sleep. There's so many things that potentially could go wrong. And ultimately, I think if you have a good team, and if you've designed things well, you trust that you've done a good job. And I guess just like in a mechanic or an engineer, if you design the car, and every time you go racing, you have a sleepless night, you'd be rubbish at your job because you'd never sleep. And
you are absolutely correct. I used to try and have a policy that it doesn't matter how good or bad the day goes. When you close the garage door, that's the day. But that doesn't really apply to you, because obviously during the day, you've got thousands of people here working away using your systems. But then when all of these people go home for the evening, we might be on another time zone in the circuit, and there might be an opportunity where we need to call you up. Hopefully, I'd like to think that you've got a brilliant team that we call them rather than waking you up, mate. But, it becomes a 24-hour job, right? Yeah,
I think it is. Because we touch every part of the business, and because the season's also quite cyclical, and even when we're not racing, it's a peak period in engineering and manufacturing because they're working on next year's car. So there's never a lull period. maybe Christmas Day or something. But I think here, this is where it comes down to having a good team, good partners, doing a good job implementing systems and putting things in that are robust. And hopefully the number of major incidents we have is quite small. But then also, if you do have major incidents, and they're inevitable with things of this complexity and speed, that you have the processes, the right people, the right procedures in place to be able to deal with that in a structured manner.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be able to trust your people and the good work you've done. Otherwise, you'd never sleep.
No, for sure. I can definitely sort of relate to that sentiment. There's been certain times where I've gone home knowing that I've done everything I needed to do, but I'll just get back to my hotel room and be like, but what about that?
In general, if you know you've not done a good job or you've cut corners too much, you know it. 80-90% of the time you know it. So, nobody knows everything, but a lot of times, and then if you do have a worry and feel like there's a major threat, you need to speak up and ask for help. And I think that comes with maturity and having the right sort of people wired to fit into this really dynamic business.
So, Matt, we've spoken a little bit of where we've come from and how we've got to here in terms of your digital infrastructure. Now, there's one thing that I've always had in my mind, and that's about our wireless, our fly-by-wire systems on the car. Now, is it a real threat that they could be accessed by a hacker or a piece of rogue code? Because, those numbers that go into the car, they're not just, this is a little bit wrong, we can change that. Like I said, these are safety systems for both the driver and people in the garage. How real is that threat?
I think the data coming off of the car is all encrypted, and the people providing the hardware and the systems, taking that and transmitting that data, are worldwide experts with class-leading products. So I think the threat is understood, and so we have the best systems on the car, some of them mandated by the FIA. And so we trust that the encryption and the ability for somebody to intercept the data and do something with it, or to go and actually connect and change the behavior of the car, we think it's quite a low risk because the right hardware and infrastructure's been put into the hardware on the car.
That's nice to know. I feel like it gives me like a little bit of relief. Something that I've always wondered about, not being someone that fully understands all of these things. I always thought in my mind that, that would be the weakest area or something like that. So it's sort of reassuring to know that you feel that you're on top of that risk.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately, if that were to happen, it's not healthy for the team or for the sport.
No.
And there's so much, as far as even the regulations, the threat is understood, and there's a lot of brain power that's gone into minimizing the risk with that threat.
Okay, so looking at future-proofing the team, Formula One, it doesn't stand still. If you're standing still, then essentially you are falling behind.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you talk about the tools, the suite of things that we have at our disposal, what does that look like? OnePassword is a part of that future.
That's right.
And how are we moving forward with this partnership to sort of ready ourselves for, firstly, 2026, but, also the more holistic picture of how threats are going to evolve?
So I think with OnePassword, it supports a big part of our ecosystem, and the part of users being who they really say they are, and knowing that that a user is really that person.
So you can't catfish your way into some data.
Yeah, exactly. So passwords, pass keys, and the way that people log in, having a tool like OnePassword, gives us confidence. We have strong passwords, and people aren't saying there's somebody they aren't. And so that's one of the key planks in our security ecosystem. Other things that we need to do are trust the devices that connect. And so we have some controls in place today, where there are machines that we own, that we have the right security, the right patches on. But OnePassword also has a product called Device Trust, and it takes the level of checking and posture checking even to another level. So we're talking now about how do we bring that into a proof of concept, and how can we build that into our operations to have even more confidence that the machines connecting to our network, are robust and secure. And then we have today a lot of cloud services, and really having a handle on what are these external things and external infrastructure, and really understanding what's being used. And OnePassword has a tool called Trellica that gives more visibility. And today we're pretty good, but here again it's belt and braces and helps raise the bar to even have more control. Yeah, and so OnePassword today plays a critical part, and then some new elements that I think could be really high value.
And I guess having a partner that's sort of so accustomed to being at the front of that fight
Yep.
is for us like fantastic, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's a real collaboration. They understand what we need. They understand,
absolutely.
we understand what they need in terms of a culture.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really works quite well.
Yeah, and if we are trying out new tools, and if we have a problem, then we're being connected to the developers,
Yeah.
and there's value being received both ways.
Yeah.
And we're a perfect guinea pig
Yeah.
because we're pushing boundaries and we're solving hard problems. And so having the right, on both sides, having the right people engaged and really saying, hey, this is a challenge, how do we get through this? And it's really quite interesting. And in the end, it should help us raise the bar where we're stronger.
I suppose in my world, I compare it to what we were used to a few years ago from an engine supplier, where essentially we received a product and that's what we had. And I compare it to what we sort of have now, we've had over the last few years, and what we'll have in 2026, which is much more of a collaborative effort, right? We work towards each other's goals and we help each other achieve those goals.
Yep. So, we have a great collaborative relationship with OnePassword. And as we've rolled out some of the existing tools that are robust, like the OnePassword based system itself, we had advice on best practice, and it really helped us to accelerate and implement it quickly. And as we're starting to evaluate newer tools for us, like Device Trust or Trelica, if we have questions around how to configure it, or if we have problems and don't understand how it can address some of our challenges, we can get back to the experts and developers in OnePassword.
Yeah.
And it's really mutually beneficial where they can improve their product. And it also helps us to get a product that meets our needs and to deploy it quicker. So the collaboration and teamwork is fantastic.
Perfect. I mean, for us on track, it's sort of those two relationships that we had with engine supply, they were very, very different. It was night and day, and the results proved it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I guess it's the same for you. Ultimately, I know we think of it as IT and numbers and things that go on in the background, but that is the same thing. You're chasing performance, you're chasing efficiency.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people use the word partnership loosely. It's a label, but here, the real world actions are really collaborative, and it's a true partnership.
Perfect. So, Matt, I want to start looking towards the future. Obviously, just over the road here, we've got this huge project in Red Bull Powertrains. One of the biggest things we've ever taken on here at Oracle Red Bull Racing, this new hybrid power unit. What does it look like starting that from scratch? This digital infrastructure, what does it look like and where do you begin?
It's been a massive challenge. And, it's been a lot of fun and also a massive challenge.
Yep.
And I think the strategic decision to build a powertrains company when we had no expertise, no infrastructure, no intellectual property, really brave choice.
Absolutely.
And also just digital tools and methods, just like they are on the chassis.
Yep.
The same applies to the engine.
Okay.
And so I think here it was early on understanding what is the business of powertrains and talking to the people that we hired and brought in as experts. What are the systems and the tools that you need, and how do you design parts? What simulations do you use? And now it's racing. What information do you need? Who's in the ops room? What decisions are they making?
Yep.
And so it's been a lot of some overlap with what we do on chassis.
Okay.
But there's lots of nuance and differences between an engine and a chassis. And so building all this from scratch, having lots of bright people, it's been a big challenge, but also really interesting. And in the end, we'll end up with control over a power unit and tighter integration with the chassis strategically for performance of the team on the track.
Yeah.
It's great news. And and all the little details and things that need to come together, it's a big challenge to build it.
Well, hopefully it's going to be absolutely seamless.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all aiming for.
And I think here it's just also part of the culture of the team taking on a big challenge and and just embracing it. And and then also it's having the right talent and mindset here, and also it's in having the right partners and right people that help us on the journey.
And I think you briefly touched on it, but obviously having never done an engine before, from your world in IT infrastructure, did it throw up challenges that we'd just never seen before?
Yeah.
Did it sort of give you some insight and go, oh, we've never considered that before?
Yeah, I mean, when it first started out, I remember there were two people that did simulations that were some of the early first staff that came in on Powertrains. And like, well, what tools do you need? And actually the scope of digital activity is probably 2 to 3 times bigger than what our first guess was. Knowing nothing about it or knowing enough to be dangerous, we underestimated the challenge. But then as more people, as the team built up and more experts came in, we learned quickly. And so I think the culture, the can-do attitude, working at speed, working with lots of changes, people are used to that. And I think, it enabled us to manage this project effectively instead of breaking in the process of building something from the ground up.
Were there like any days where you felt like you had the checkbook out just constantly? Just, oh no, we need this and we didn't anticipate it and now we need this. Was there a bit of that at the beginning?
Yeah, and there was no finance director the first day also.
Well, I think everyone's unpopular with accounts, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think, the early days, it was a big investment. I think the powers that be knew broadly what the number was, but as you decompose it down to individual purchases, within IT for sure we underestimated it.
For sure.
And now we have cost caps for powertrains, just as we do in the chassis. Initially, that wasn't there, so that's good news. But I think the whole engagement's been amazing, and it's probably in my professional career here and outside of F1, one of the biggest challenges I've ever had.
Yeah. And obviously now going forward and with that cost cap in place, it's imperative you make the right choices, right? In terms of your partners, the suites of tools that you use, and also your procedures.
Yeah, invest in the right areas, get the most bang for the buck, and all that.
That's it. And I think that leads on quite nicely, actually, because something that is obviously the buzzword in tech is AI.
Yep.
It's a powerful tool.
Yep.
But of course needs proper management and security that goes with it.
Yep.
How do you, keep embracing this culture of wanting to move forward and be part of those next steps, but also make sure that you are handling it in a way where it doesn't put at risk all of the work that you've done so far?
Yep. So, I think AI, we've been doing it for many years and just not calling it AI. And so machine learning and things that are very specific models, to simulate parts of the car, we've been doing that for 10 years. But AI being as pervasive and touching as many things, the last few years, it's skyrocketed. And I think some of the general approach is how do you adopt new technology, whether it's for the car, or in our systems. It's first go and have finger on the pulse, understand what the opportunity and what is the state of the art, and talking to the right people who are driving it. And then it's engage with them, get partnerships, and start small, do proof of concept, learn, attack it, put some of your best people that are dedicated to it. And so setting aside resource and some of your best people to really understand it and start growing it. And then as you get some success with your experiments, then scale it up and build it into your operations. But there's a few checkpoints there also where, hey, is it really doing something? And as we start scaling it up, what are the controls and procedures we need to put in place, and how do you manage change management? And because of the culture in the company of fast moving and liking to be early adopters and taking risks, that mindset that we've always had, I think, helps us adopt or deal with the AI challenge of exploiting it, taking advantage of it, but not losing control.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? We are a team that tries to make sure that we're at the forefront of bringing new tech into the business. But because, if you wait until all your competitors are doing it, you're behind already.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It is, I imagine, a real balancing act.
Yeah, and if you look in engineering, both in chassis and powertrains and within IT, we've all taken some of the best talent we have and said, your job is now AI, understand it, figure it out, how do we exploit it, and make good things happen. And so investing in it, but also still having some control points so it doesn't, you don't have kids in a candy shop. So having enough control, but empowering people to innovate. And so that's been our general approach.
I just use it to make photos of me look better, to be fair. That's about where I'm at with it. I haven't quite progressed further than that.
Did it work?
It's a challenge. I like to set a challenge for these things, Right, so right now here at Oracle Rebel Racing, we are using OnePassword as our password manager across the organization. But what's next? Where does this relationship go from here?
So OnePassword is now pervasive throughout, not only for individuals, but also behind the scenes with some of our system accounts where machines or applications talk to other applications. So we're building that into our tool set. And now we're looking at other products that OnePassword sells, Device Trust and Trelica. And we're starting POCs for both of them. And so Device Trust handles the challenge of things that plug into our network. Are they trusted devices?
Okay.
Do they have the right patches? Are they secure?
Right.
And doing an assessment before it allows it onto our network. And so the controls we have now, we have a reasonable baseline, but it takes that to the next level to give us even more confidence that things connecting to the network have the right posture. And then Trelica will help us better manage software as a service, cloud services.
Okay.
A lot of it's there today. There's some also that we're not aware of. And just having more visibility, understanding risks for things we're not aware of, understanding where money goes, and with cost caps particularly important, and just to get a handle more on cloud usage. And so Trelica has a lot of promise to help us better manage cloud applications.
Amazing. So we've said, we've spoken about the tools, but obviously we said at the beginning, a big part of all this is about the culture, right?
Yep.
People have to be prepared and ready and well educated in order to
Yep.
make these systems function properly. But there's also the will to do it, right?
Yep.
So how do you convince a race winner or a world championship winning driver to care about this stuff? How do you get them to embrace the culture? Is it about making them understand the stakes?
Yeah, ultimately the drivers want to win, don't
Yeah.
they?
And I know a particular race driver that, what he wants to do more than anything is just focus on his driving and win. But it's obviously just as important for them to care about this stuff as it is everything else.
Yeah, I think with the driver, it's saying it's an unnecessary risk and it puts winning at risk.
Yeah.
It's talking to people in terms they understand and with things that are of value to them and linking the need for security to things of value to people. And you need to talk in just plain English and talk to, in a way that it resonates with people. But I think that's a big part of the what's needed to manage security. It really is a team effort. And we need to translate all this technical stuff that people may think it's a boring detail and relate it to why it really matters to them and ask them to help.
Yeah, amazing. And is there, in all of that tech that we all have access to, is there a particular piece of it on the campus or when we fly away? Is there one bit of it that fans might be surprised to hear even exists, or just a piece of tech that you find the most impressive?
No, I don't think there's any single silver bullet. I think when you look at what it takes, sort of use an onion analogy with lots of layers, you need all those layers to really manage the topic well. And I think people would probably be surprised to hear just how much it takes and how many pieces in the puzzle you need to manage to really do well to keep yourself secure.
No, absolutely. I think it's true. I think it's easy. We say the same thing about the performance of the car, don't we? It's not a one new floor or one wing. It's about the entire thing coming together to work the way we need it to.
As a system, exactly that. And it's the machine and it's the people and it's the procedures. And if any of that falls down, you're not going to win.
Absolutely. Right, Matt, I want to talk about you for a moment. And I want to see if there is a piece of advice that you would offer to any other corporate leaders listening, a piece of advice in particular to your work in security that you think is key to success.
Yep. I think there's several planks that should be considered. So I think one is dedicate the right resources into it, set up a security team, but a team with people that in our world are racers that understand the business, the people, the culture, and to really understand the risks, but also have a technical mindset where you can engage with the right tool providers to identify and build the right controls. So invest, get the right team. Think second, set the right culture. And security is a team sport, and and not just onto a security team. And really getting the message out and building the case so that people feel they actually have an active role in it. Third one is pick the right partners. In our case, OnePassword is one of those key partners, and people that know, the threats in the broader world, know more about security than we do, and come with suggestions and the right products and right approaches. And so they're sort of basic things. They're easy to say, but they're all the devil's in the detail.
No, for sure.
But those are the big planks. And I also think just knowing the business, knowing what's critical, what's sensitive, and knowing what do you really have to protect, and focus your efforts on what we need to protect.
Matt, this has been honestly a great learning time for me. I feel like I understand a little bit better just the scale of what you're up against, but also just to sort of get an insight into the holistic view of how you go about this, and especially when you talk about the culture of security. Like, I remember first starting, even here, it was like this scary thing. Like, oh God, I don't want to get that wrong because IT are going to come after me. Like this big scary department. But actually, I've sat down and I've spoken to yourself, and I've spoken to Nimesh, and and spoke to Mark, and you're also lovely.
Yeah.
You're all such like approachable people. And I think, I feel like we need to start doing a PR campaign for IT just so that people know this, because it's a part of it, isn't it? Is it not being afraid to go to IT and say, look, I've got this issue, I'm not sure what to do, but that's the best option, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is to ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we try to be positive and know it's, a business on the edge and pushing boundaries. We need to be part of it. And then there's part of it where if there are bad apples, you also sometimes have to take your gloves off. And hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but if you need to, you need to.
Mate, the worst I ever did was a crossword, I promise you.
You've not come up on the danger list.
Not yet. I mean, to be fair, even when I'm at home now and I have to like log in with my VPN, I'm like extra careful because I don't even want it to come up that I've got the password wrong, because I'm like, IT will know that. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us today for the Securing the Win podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm not going to take any more time because I know how busy you are on this campus, and we're just about to get into the next race. So I'm sure you've got plenty to oversee, but I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.